And it just led me to realize, you know what? I need to change myself for the better.
Power to Live More with Joe Dodds.
Welcome to the Power to Live More podcast, all about productivity, organisation, well-being, energy and resilience. I'm Jo Dodds, and I started this show to enable interesting people to share their stories about how they use their power to live more, and by that I mean to do the stuff that they want to do more than the stuff that they need to or should do. It's about creating a life for yourself where you have the energy, health and space to be happy and fulfilled, spending your time as you'd like, whether that be at work, home or somewhere else entirely. That's your choice.
Hello, my name is Ellie Dodson and I'm co-presenter, and today Joe's interviewing Don Brightmon. Don was introduced to us by Alex Dumas, our guest on show number 111. Dom is an award-winning speaker and certified member of the John Maxwell Team. He is the author of Going North, Tips and Techniques to Advance Yourself, and runs a top-rated self-help podcast with the same name that interviews authors from all over the world. His mantra is advance others to advance yourself. Back to the studio.
Today I'm interviewing Don Brightmon. Welcome, Dom. Great to have you with me.
It's great to be here, Joe. How you feeling?
I'm feeling good. It's the end of the day, so I'm feeling good and looking forward to my evening. How are you?
Looks like your day's ending. Mine's just beginning.
Yeah, exactly. Excellent. So tell us a bit about who you are, what you do, and where you do it.
Sure thing. So, name's Dominic Don Brightmon, as Joe mentioned earlier, and I'm a certified leadership expert and coach under the John Maxwell Team. And in addition to that, when I'm not coaching and speaking, also writing books, a 2-time author and Amazon best-selling author of the book called Stay the Course, The Elite Performer's 7 Secret Keys to Sustainable Success. And I'm also a podcast host as well. So life's basically around books, because books are kind of like the treasure troves of stories and knowledge to absorb to not only better your life, but better other people's lives. So you can kind of call me a bookie.
Excellent. So where are you based?
Based out in the city of charm, crime, and crabs, known as Baltimore, Maryland.
Yeah, I wouldn't have got that from the clues. And for those people who aren't aware of John Maxwell Team, tell us a bit about who is it? A he? Is it just a company now, or is John Maxwell a person?
Oh, don't worry, it's a he, and he's alive and well, 72 at the time of this recording. So for those who've been living under 15 rocks, John C. Maxwell is the world's #1 leadership authority, and he's been a very, very well-versed communicator for the past 50 years. He started off as a young pastor out in a small church in Hillham, Indiana. He was a pastor of that small church, helped them to grow. Then he went to San Diego, California, helped the church to become one of the top 10 growing churches in the early millennium, and then helping so many other churches grow. He actually left pastoring to become a full-time businessman and helping other folks to become better leaders. And he's a New York Times best-selling author of over 100 books. And about 6 years ago, actually, wow, I think it's almost 7 years ago now, he started the John Maxwell Team as a part of his legacy legs, because he originally thought that his books was going to be his legacy. But his books affected so many people in such a positive way that he actually now has a training company called the John Maxwell Team, where you're basically licensed certified to teach his materials to keep his legacy going. Because John Maxwell, his books, his writings have saved my life personally, especially his book, The 21 Qualities of a Leader. And it just mentioned like so many qualities of a leader and the qualities that a leader should have. And I strive to have most of those qualities, if not all of those qualities, and help me to become more of an extrovert, because I used to be fully introverted, like in the corner or whatever, geeky kid, not really much on the sports team or whatever, to this dynamic speaker whose aim is to help others to advance in life. Because if you advance others, you advance yourself in the process.
So how did it all change for you then? Obviously the book and John Maxwell himself inspired you, but you've already said you were quite different in the past and you've changed quite considerably. How did that happen, and why do you do what you do now?
Yeah, so back in 2012, on my 21st birthday, after my father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, I got into a car accident on my way to class. And just on top of that, I also, a few weeks later, was called into a meeting by my boss at the time because I had a part time job at a library. And I wanted to pride myself to be early off to actually keep the personal and professional lives separate. But as years go by and time goes by, you realize that's kind of near impossible because what happens in your private life will affect your public life. And just the fact of seeing basically my hero decay, my father, and that car accident just not being at my best, it all compounded with that means like, hey, you're screwing up here, here, and here. And it just led me to realize, you know what, I need to change myself for the better because for that up to that point, I had that library job for about a good 5 years up to that point, and that's solid, great work, except for those few weeks leading up to that meeting. And I really liked books, but I never had a real habit of voraciously reading books. So after that, realizing that, hey, something needs to change. I had a desire for change. So that's when I actually came across John Maxwell by going in the leadership section of the library, picking up that book, and then eventually setting a goal for myself by reading at least 50 plus books a year from various subjects, mostly in nonfiction, to become a better communicator, a better speaker, as well as just a better all human being, because it's always great to also to develop relationships along the way, because that's really the time that we're in. It's where folks that know you are the ones that will actually support you, buy from you, and actually help you to become a better person. And not only setting that goal of reading 50 plus books a year, but to also have a New Year's mantra for the year of basically setting a 1 to 3 word mantra. And 2013, after that few months of struggle, I wouldn't realize, you know what, 2013 was going to be the year of rebirth, becoming a stronger version of myself. I actually became more of an extrovert and became more of a people person. And some folks like, hey, you running for mayor or something? Like, no, I'm not a politician, not a politician, but I do like people and like helping people. So that's really where it all came from.
That's quite an amazing story that you basically picked up a book and now you're doing what you're doing. It's quite a transformation and quite quick as well, really.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm still a work in progress. There's still some things I need to work on myself. So even though there was a little bit of a quick in terms of the story, it's really is still a work in progress. So it ain't over. No, none of us is done. If we're alive,
No.
we still got something to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us more about some of the things that you did do to make that change. And obviously, you've mentioned your mantra, and you've talked about reading lots of books. A lot of people read books but don't actually put things into practice. So it creates a increase in knowledge, but it doesn't necessarily change the way that people behave. Why did that work for you?
I think it worked for me because I actually was naive enough and actually, I guess, depending on who you ask, smart enough to take the advice from those books and actually put them into practice. Because a lot of Maxwell's books have activities at the end of the books. And another book I read by an author by the name of David Schwartz, who wrote the book The Magic of Thinking Big. He has another book that he wrote after that called The Magic of Getting What You Want. And an activity in there mentions how if you really want to put your personal development on steroids in a way, is to write your own personal obituary. And that was another way of actually getting myself to where I currently am at the moment as an author, because one of the things I wrote in that obituary was to become an author, and not only just an author, but a best-selling author. And I was able to do that with the help of friends and family who actually supported me and purchasing the work and some folks even leaving reviews. And not only that, but also being a dynamic speaker as well and just inspiring others to embrace their dreams. And another way of actually taking that personal development and doing that is to not only do that and to actually write an obituary, but to also just journal. I mean, it doesn't even though it's highly recommended to be done every day, if you do it at least sporadically, at least do some kind of recording of your life, it'll pay off dividends because you'll have something to go back to and look on. Because sometimes I go through my journals in the past and see where I was some years ago, and it's amazing how the growth can happen. So that's also another thing too, is just journaling. And heck, even if someone may be brave enough out there, you can actually publish a book on your own using some of the things you've journaled about if you feel like bringing that out into the open, because a lot of folks are publishing books nowadays, and it's really great because if anyone wants to write a book, it's easy now than ever.
So how did you write your book? Because again, lots of people say they want to write books, but not many people actually do that, or if they do start, they don't finish or get to the point of publishing it. How did you approach that?
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. So the way I approached it was in a Toastmasters meeting. And for those who don't know about Toastmasters, it's this nonprofit organization where folks develop themselves as leaders and speakers. And one of the talks I was giving required a Q&A session. And a friend of mine, he asked me, like, hey, when's your book coming out? Because there was a moment in time where a couple of days ago, someone dared me to write a book and I didn't accept that dare. And what made that story even funnier is the fact that this was after I wrote the obituary saying I was going to be an author. Mm-hmm. But just after that moment, him asking me that question is like, all right, I can't really back down from this. So I was like, you know what? A year from today, I'm going to have my first book published. Yeah, so it was pretty interesting. So after that, I ran home. I wrote down 14 pages of content from pen to paper, like literally wrote down actual stuff. And those 14 pages actually drilled it down, polished it up, and made it the last chapter of my first book. And then I kind of went through a period of hibernation away because that was November 2015 when it happened, and didn't pick it back up again until around January 2016. And every weekend after work, I would go to Dunkin' Donuts, a Starbucks, or a coffee shop and just write down my thoughts about certain subjects. So if it was like leadership, I write down thoughts about leadership, time management, what I would think about that, and just mindset, what my thoughts about mindset was, and just writing down my thoughts on paper, and then just sitting down for about a good 60 to 90 minutes, just writing down whatever just came out of me and putting it down on paper, because it's a good thing to actually write down your thoughts because it helps you to clarify your thoughts. And if you want to write a book based off of that, you can also go back and type in your stuff so that way you're editing as you're going along, because sometimes I write stuff down at the coffee shop and I go back home and actually type it in the computer later. It's like, okay, what the heck was I smoking when I wrote this? So yeah, it's like, yeah, it's kind of better that way as opposed to the old-fashioned typing. I mean, yeah, it's not as quick, but still, it just gives you another way to polish your work and give yourself an idea, maybe expand on it too. So that's really how I took on that writing process of the book.
Yes, yeah, impressive stuff to just say you're going to do it and then go and write the last chapter.
Yeah, that's another thing too. I mean, yeah, it's great to put an outline out for a book. If it's a nonfiction book, just make the outline, but it doesn't have to be in order when you write it. It's kind of like a callback to the opening. I mean, those 14 pages, that was ended up being the last chapter of the book, and everything else, that was just random moments that end up having to piece together under certain chapters. So don't even worry about the order at first.
Yeah. So tell us a bit about what your sort of day looked like, because you obviously you've written a book, you're coaching people, you're doing various things, reading a lot still by the sound of it. How do you organise what you do and get done what you need to get done?
The best way for me to organize is usually writing things down on a note card the night before and just organizing them in like an ABC/1, 2, 3 method, and having my main event as the first thing, the thing I need to conquer for the day. So if I have like a big presentation, that's usually like the first thing, write down like, hey, deliver a dynamite presentation and hopefully leave someone inspired to do something big in their life, as opposed to maybe like a project at work that may needs to get done. Because in addition to all this, still have a daytime job on top of this, because I mean, still need health insurance. So it just gotta keep that in mind as well. I usually try to keep it up to at least a maximum of 6 items, because of what I've noticed in the trial and error is that when I write down more than 5 or 6 things to do for the day, I'm not going to get the whole list done, because sometimes I would experiment, try 10 items for the day, and I still ended up getting 6 to 7 things done. So trying to at least get it up to at least 6. And that's actually recommended by, I believe, a guy by the name of Chet Holmes, and in his book called The Ultimate Sales Machine, because he borrowed that from Mary Kay Ash when she usually had 6 things to do for the day, and just keeping it at 6, because there's only so much you can do in a day. I mean, we all got the same amount of time, and we can only use that time to the best of our ability. And it also depends on the energy for that day too. So another thing is that since it's coming to the close of summer, I haven't been working out as much as I would like. Just being a little bit vulnerable there for a moment, and I've noticed the difference. So that's another thing too, is just getting back into a routine of exercise where it's like a light little mix of push-ups, sit-ups, and squats and things like that to get the blood pumping, so you'll be able to produce more. Because I noticed a difference in, I'm pretty sure some of your listeners know the difference too. It's like when you don't do something active to get your body moving, then you're going to be more sluggish. You're not going to feel like doing much at all.
How do you determine these 6 items? How do you determine the sort of the relative size of them? Because I mean, you could easily put 20 things on your list, but they might take 5 minutes each, or you could put one thing which would take up the whole day. Do you have a process for determining that? Do you work out the time and chop it up, or how do you decide the sort of relative time and effort required for each of those tasks?
Yeah, so for those, it usually depends on the task. So if it's like a presentation, then it usually depends on what I prepared beforehand and try to match the calendar with it. So if it's like a Google Calendar, try to look at the Google Calendar and see what I have planned for the day, like a podcast interview. I usually block out a good 45 minutes for it, even though the average interview takes about 30 to 37 minutes. It's usually for working out the possible kinks, kind of like what you and I had earlier. For moments like that too.
Those moments when we can't actually hear each other. It doesn't work well on a podcast, does it?
No, it does. It's like, yeah, so how about that cactus? Wait a second, we're talking about productivity here. Leave the cactus alone.
So,
yeah.
And do you tick off everything on that list of 6 things, or do you carry things over?
Sometimes I carry things over. I'm not gonna lie, because sometimes it's like, all right, because like for example, like if someone goes ghost on me at the last minute with the interview or whatever and doesn't show up, and then they come back with an explanation later, it's like, all right, got to reschedule that. Or if for some strange reason I had to do like a visit at a certain club and they may have canceled the last minute, it's like, all right, got to reschedule that. Because there's probably this phrase you might be familiar with, that control is an illusion. It's like we all want control, but we can only control up to a fault. We can only focus on what we can't control.
Yeah.
And nature may come out of nowhere and be like, nah, buddy, let's remind you of who's in control. And you have to push that item aside for another day.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So how do you manage getting stuff done in a sort of practical way? So you've got your list. Do you have a to-do list? Do you have tools and apps that you use? Especially given you're doing this alongside a job as well. You have limited time, don't you? So how do you manage these items?
Yeah, so I'm a little bit of a simple fellow. I usually just go by an index card or one of those small notepads, and with the combination of Google Calendar as well on the smartphone, I really don't use any major apps because even though I had an IT degree a few years ago, I'm really not too much of a techie guy because usually with pen to paper, it sticks in your head a lot easier as opposed to the phone. And not to mention, sometimes if you schedule on other people's calendars, it doesn't always sync up properly and you end up overbooking or double booking. So, yeah.
I'm sure you can do that on paper too.
Yeah, you can do it on paper too. It's like, yeah, it's just a combination. So just have a Google Calendar and just pen and paper. Try to keep it simple.
It's funny for all the talk about technology and millennials and everything else. I seem to find it's my younger guests who use more analog and older guests who use more digital, which is quite interesting. Maybe the world is turning in on itself and we're going to end up back completely with paper. I don't know. So you talked about exercise being really helpful to you in terms of focus and having sort of energy to get done what you need to get done. What else do you do to make sure that you're in a position to be able to do all these things that you do? Because as we say, you're obviously, working a job as well as running a business, doing a podcast. Clearly you need to maintain your energy levels. Have you got any other tips around that for us?
Oh yeah, drink water first thing in the morning as soon as you wake up because your body's dehydrated from all the sleeping as soon as you empty yourself when you first wake up. So just filling yourself up with water first before the actual coffee itself, because even though coffee is great, at least for me anyway, it's still not a great idea because it really just leaves you with a little bit breathless in a way if you do a lot of walking or running afterwards. So basically just water first thing in the morning, and also just affirmation use as well. I usually do that on occasion. Sometimes I like to shout out loud like something really good is going to happen to me today, and on occasion I usually try to yell out, do it now, do it now, do it now, at least a good 30 to 50 times.
Wow.
So that way I can try to get myself into that zone, because there may be times where it's like we're all human here. There's going to be days where you're not going to feel like you just want to curl up in almost the fetal position, maybe put on an invisible turtle shell and just hibernate for a bit. And it's like, no, let me just shout out, do it now, so I can actually get out there and do it now.
Yeah. So how do you work with your clients when you're working with the John Maxwell team? What's the sort of model for that in terms of how you help people to improve their leadership?
The main model I like to use is question-based. So basically asking questions and listening, because especially from the coaching aspect, most folks know what they want out of life. They just need it to be drawn out of them. And if you just ask the right questions and then just listen and then do a little nudge here and there, it usually helps folks get redirected north and away to where they want to be. And heck, there also is this exercise out there where it's usually the 7 layers deep, where you ask yourself why 7 times about a certain thing. It's like, all right, so why do you want to be successful? It's like, what is success? It's like, why do you want to be successful? It's like, yeah, I want to provide for my family. All right, that's good. And then it's like, why? Well, hey, it's like, I want to provide for my family, and then I just want to have a really good feeling like, hey, I feel like I've done something in my life, and then ask why again. It's like, all right, And then that's when I'm usually around the third or fourth one, folks usually stop trying to think, and then that's when the heart comes out because it's like the mind's like, all right, shoot, all right, I'm out. All right, heart, you get in there. Like, all right, so what do you really feel?
Yeah, yeah. So sort of pulling away all the sort of layers that are sort of rational answers to that question, and getting really to the heart of it. Yeah.
That's right. Everybody's an onion, baby.
So, what about learning and improving yourself? You talked at the beginning about how your sort of recent journey all kicked off from reading a book. Are you still reading as voraciously as you were?
Oh, yes, ma'am, I am. Still reading books. I read a lot of books. I mean, of course, Maxwell is my favorite author of all time, but also read books from folks like Stephen Chandler with his book, 100 Ways to Motivate Yourself and 100 Ways to Motivate Others. And then there's a book by Stephen K. Scott, an older book called A Millionaire's Notebook, where this book is probably like published like in 95. It's an older book, but it still has some great principles about making sure you have a mentor in your life. And a couple other books I read this year. One was from a guy by the name of Antonio T. Smith, who wrote the book called So Happy and Grateful. And it's like a 500-page book, but the way the font is set up in the book, it's really large print, so it's a quick read. And the last book I will recommend for this year's From Homeless to Billionaire by Andres Pira, where he basically set out to prove the book The Secret wrong, and he ended up proving it right by taking the activities from it. So not only reading and doing the activities from it, but also making sure that I record my presentations, because sometimes I may even learn for myself, because out of the mouth, the heart speaks. And also my podcast is a learning opportunity as well, because I get to listen from other folks, hear the stories, be inspired, and may listen or hear a tip or something interesting that I may write down later to use. So that's really where a lot of my learning comes from nowadays.
And how do you organize your podcast? Are you asking specific questions? Is it a very sort of fluid, what comes up? Is there a theme to it, a structure? How does that run?
Yeah, so right now the podcast itself is a free-flowing conversation, because at one time when I started out, I had these 5 or 6 questions that I made sure I ask every single guest. And then around the 20th time, I asked somebody what's their favorite music that they like to listen to. It was like, okay, this feels stupid. You want to listen, like, all right, you can drop that question. I'm like, all right, cool. So it's more of a free-flowing conversation. The only real single question I ask it, okay, well, 2 questions is, of course, the one to promote themselves at the end of the interview, and also what advice they would give themselves if they were 25 in the current year with all their amassed knowledge and experience. So instead of folks going back in time and investing in Apple stock, it's like, nope, you're currently a millennial in the year of 2019 or whatever, and you got to navigate your way through life with all of your new amassed knowledge.
So how old are you now?
Currently 27.
Okay, so we can do that with you then. So, if you, how do you pronounce? How do you say it to people? You say, if you were 25 now, with everything you know now, what would you do? Is that what you say?
Yep, that's basically the way it goes.
Answer.
Yeah, so what I would do is I would basically tell myself to make sure that no matter what happens, you have an aggressive form of personal development. Don't get so down on yourself and actually lose heart. So make sure you just stay courage, keep yourself full of courage, keep up with the workouts, and never slack off of the workouts, because there's going to be a time where you're going to be losing your dad, and it's not going to be a good feeling at all. So make sure you keep up with the workouts and don't slack off with that, because there's going to be a dirty bulking phase that you want to avoid. So that's the advice I would give to myself.
Cool. I'll have to get you back in 10 years or something and find out the next bit. So what what has come up from for you from those questions of your guests? Is there anything that stands out that because it's interesting, it's really hard when you're young to think about being older and having sort of wisdom that you've gained over the years. It just seems like a bit of a cliche. But I was 50 this year, and for the last few years I've been talking to people and saying, "Oh, if only we could sort of bottle what you do know when you're, 30, 40, 50, 60, however old, and somehow give it to young people." But of course it doesn't work like that, because you've got to live through it, haven't you? You've got to experience it in order for it to actually stick anyway. But is there anything that's come out of those questions that really has stuck with you?
Oh yeah, there was quite a few. Funny enough, one of the answers I had to take out of the in the final cut of the episode, because I'm not sure how our kids would have felt with that. I was like, yeah, if I I wouldn't be a mom if I was 25 again. I'm like, oh. Okay.
Oh no, yes, you wouldn't want that one in there, would you? That would stand out, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that one's probably stood out the most. It was like last summer when I asked that, when I interviewed that person, and I was like, okay, she's like, is that wrong? I'm like, kind of is, but on one hand, it's like, yeah, I mean, life, it's like they wouldn't be able to live, but on one hand, it's like, all right, the whole parenthood thing, the whole struggles, but it's like, yeah, that one stood out. And also, one guest, funny enough,
here we go.
her funny was it was funny. And she said, yep, she would tell herself, you won't be this broke always.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know. So what about for you? What about those days when it all goes horribly wrong, when you have a really bad day? How do you deal with that?
A few things. So one, I try to take a deep breath and try to get my mindset back on, you know what? Someone out there is in a worse situation than me. This is a first world problem, no matter what it is. And there's also the 5-minute rule, where I try to keep telling myself, like, all right, I'll give energy to this setback for a maximum of 5 minutes. After that, I'll have to leave it alone, because what's done is done. It's like certain actions the only thing you can do when certain things happen is just adjust yourself accordingly after what happens, because heck, even like sometimes, like with meeting with the boss, it's like, oh, it's like, what the heck is this? Because it's like I expect to get called in for one thing or nothing, and then it's to be some totally stupid, and I'm like, all right, no, I'm going to go ahead and ignore this and just keep my nose to the grindstone and realize that, hey, I'm building something big here, and it's something that's going to be bigger than me. So making sure that I don't stew over something for days on end, because life is too short to be full of negative emotions that aren't going to serve you well, and you won't be able to move as light or quickly if you keep letting yourself being hindered by negative emotions or setbacks that can be adjusted for something greater and better in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what about those days where you get to live more? So that's where you get to do more of the things that you want to do and less of the things that you feel you should do or you have to do. What do those days look like for you?
Oh, those days are great. Those days are great indeed. It's usually where I'm inspiring somebody and they laugh at one of my bad jokes, and it's like, all right, cool. All right, this is great. It's like, all right, one person laughed at it. I'm going to be torturing 30 other people with this other same joke, and they ain't going to see it coming either.
Okay, I'm not going to let you off with that one. What else?
Oh yeah, yep. It's not only the jokes, and also just being well rested. In effect, being well rested is another thing too, and also, heck, even if there's a moment where I can like revisit like video games every now and then, if I can turn on the PlayStation every now and then and go in for like a good hour or maybe a 30 minutes or so like that. And also just the fact that maybe even having good conversations with other human beings, because usually my podcast as well, it's a very enjoyable time 9 times out of 10, especially with the fun folks. Like, all right, the energy is his match. We're in sync. We're aligned. All right. And then we're both using bad jokes after a while. It's like, yeah, all right. The mind control is complete. You're going to be saying yes, indeed, for the next 24 hours. It's going to be awesome.
You need to go and buy one of those bad dad jokes books or something. That will help you with that. Doing more of the bad jokes.
Oh, yeah. I did read that book this year. The Twitter page for dad jokes says put all the Twitter bad dad jokes in the book form. I tortured my colleagues with that for 2 months this past summer. So, yeah.
And I thought I was joking.
Nope, you weren't.
Lovely. So thanks, Dom. Tell people how they can find out more about you and connect with you.
Sure thing. Feel free to Google me, Dominic Dom Brightmon. Head over to dombrightmon.vip. That's where you can find out all my other social media pages and shoot me an email directly as well. You can find my books, my podcast, as well as the YouTube page where I have some clips of past talks and presentations as well. And heck, if you shoot me an email, you might even get a special present. And don't worry, it won't be a dad joke either.
Yeah, it's probably best to explain that, isn't it? Lovely. Thanks for joining me, Dom. It's been good talking to you.
Woohoo! Thanks for having me, Joe.
All this information is available in the show notes. If you go to powertolivemore.com/, in this case 133, you'll find them there. And this week I just want to talk about outsourcing. It's something that I've been doing for a number of years. I have a couple of VAs in the Philippines who do certain parts of my work for me that's very sort of administrative and weekly and, frankly, in my view, boring and relentless. But they have been doing it for ages and are really grateful to have the work and do a really good, solid job for me. I don't really hear from either of them unless there's a problem with something that I've produced or that I've not produced that they need in order to get their work done, and then I just pay them on a monthly basis and all ticks along nicely. I had some other things that I really wanted to get somebody to do that I didn't want to outsource to them for various reasons, and so I had sort of sat on that for a while, and it's something that I talk about when I talk about outsourcing quite often, which is that I think most of us understand the concept of it being a good thing to do, i.e. get somebody else to do our work so that we don't have to do it, and somebody else who might be better at it or more consistent or have more attention to detail or whatever, more available perhaps. But the actual effort it takes to do it, in finding somebody, testing them out if you like, and then setting up whatever you need to set up, the processes, the access to the various platforms and everything else to get it going, is actually fairly time consuming, and that's what normally stops people. I think there's a load of barriers there that can get in the way, and I've recently started working with a new VA in the UK, and I just wanted to remind you of how helpful it can be, whilst also acknowledging that it's a bit of a pain to get it started in the first place, pain for both of us, my new VA and me, but that it's absolutely really worth it in the end. So I have a few tasks that feed into some of the tasks that the VAs in the Philippines do that I do really well sometimes, and then I sort of forget to do, or I put it off, or I do it at the last minute or whatever, and that's when they contact me to say, have you done that bit yet? And I know it's me that's holding up the process. So I found somebody who can do those bits, and I found her. One of my podcast guests had a challenge on Facebook. I was in the Facebook group, saw that one of the people, somebody from I think Canada or America, the person in the Facebook group was from the UK, saw that she was a VA, tracked her down through people per hour, got in contact and kicked things off from there. So a very random way of finding somebody, but actually she has been really good, and I'm really pleased that that's how it happened, because sometimes you join these challenges and Facebook groups not thinking they're going to be worth anything to you, and clearly that was worth it from her point of view, or so far. Maybe she'll decide differently further down the line. And it's taken probably 3 weeks to sort of get in touch, get things kicked off, work out what I needed to do. And there's only 3 tasks to begin with, and one of them doesn't even have any work outstanding at the moment, but I just wanted to get her in the groove so that she was ready for when there was.
But it involved, I don't know, access to about 5 different platforms. I recorded a couple of videos. She then couldn't get into a couple of the platforms. I had to go back and have another look. Google Calendar is messing around. I've got a corporate account for my email, and I realised that corporately or organisationally it was set up so I couldn't actually share my calendar so people can actually make changes to it. So I've had to go in and set that, which apparently takes 24 hours to propagate, and that's still not sorted. So we're still in the process really of getting things going, but she has done 2 or 3 pieces of work for me, and I'm already mightily relieved that I'm not going to need to do them. And of course the knock-on effect is that my other 2 VAs will be also mightily relieved, because they'll just be able to get on with their job instead of waiting for me, the bottleneck. So if you haven't thought about outsourcing, I'd really encourage you thinking about what parts of what you do you don't want to do, you're not very good at, you don't need to do, and how you can possibly outsource them, and then think about how you might do that. And the thing to remember as well is it's not always as expensive as you think it's going to be. I think some people hold back because they think it's like employing an employee. You're only paying for a few hours of work a week, a month, whatever, and you can flex that according to your budget. So if budget is an issue, I'd start with the one thing that really winds you up, that you really hate doing, that you're really not very good at, and you really know that somebody else would be better at it than you, and work out how much time that takes, and then start looking on places like People Per Hour or some of the other sites that are offering people for outsourcing, and see how much it's going to cost per hour for you to get somebody to help you, and then work out how often that needs to be done in your business, and whether therefore you can find a bit of money to pay for that. And in most cases I'm sure you will be able to, and actually the relief and the sort of exponential energy that's created by not now needing to do whatever that task was, and also the consistency of it just happening without you having to do it, should absolutely far outweigh the budget that you've put aside for it. So that's my challenge for you this week, is to go and have a look at that one thing in your business that you really don't want to or need to be doing, and see what steps you can put in place to start to find somebody to do that for you. If I can help in any way, then please do get in touch, joe@powertolivemore.com. And again, the show notes for this week's show are at powertolivemore.com/133, and we look forward to speaking to you next week.
Use your power to live more.